call the meeting to order, how's that?
That's perfect.
I do that in organizational meetings, so.
Then I move Ed be appointed the temporary chair.
I second.
And all I need is an agenda, which turns out.
Here you go. How's that?
Thank you.
Oh, I gotta call her. Yeah, let me get my phone out.
Okay, we have no public, sorry.
We need someone to take minutes.
There shouldn't be that many minutes, right?
It should be easy.
All right, let's
Do
get,
my part.
let's get her on. I told him last night, it did make him chuckle. I said, if you could have a bad connection if you go on too long.
No, he said the last he said to me is he's going to find a landline.
Yeah, he called me tonight. I've got
Anybody
one.
volunteer to take the brief minutes that we're going to have? Thank you.
Thank you.
I
I'm a
move
compulsive-
Nancy be commended in advance for a brilliant
I'm a
minutes.
compulsive note taker.
No second.
So the approval of the,
I move the approval of the previous meeting's minutes.
I would like to make some edits. I would too.
I would agree. Maybe they're all the
Well, you
same.
can second it. then we can
Oh,
finish.
no. Now I already lost a conviction.
okay.
Okay, under 5B, these are two typos that I have. The spelling of my name should be K-A-R-E-T. And then under C3, March 7 vote should be town, not town clerks.
Yep, I got that. The,
So let's see.
do I have to write those down?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was the first one?
The spelling of my
Spelling
name,
unity.
K-A-R-E-T, not A-T.
A-T?
K-A-R-E-T.
All right, and where is that?
That's under 5B.
Okay, 5B, and then?
5C,
5C
3
is
is
town.
town clerks.
Any other corrections?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Under 5C2, 2A even, under the subcommittee members, it says Miss Rosenthal, but it's really me, Miss Loud.
Got that? Go ahead.
Okay, it says that Melanie read her letter. I think she just summarized it because it was a long letter.
I believe she read it down.
She didn't read it.
No, she didn't read it.
Summarize.
Okay.
Yeah.
She summarized the points in it.
Right.
Any other corrections to minutes? Do we have
I
a,
approve the corrections and propose again my
second to approving the minutes as corrected?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries.
So now I can make this.
Now for discussion of the approval of changes in process for amending articles.
Are they any different than sent to us?
Yeah, I can give a little intro on that. We're trying to get her on.
I'm trying to get her.
I'll go ahead and bring you up to date on that. So, and anyone on the editing committee, feel free to jump in. Yeah, so just in terms of process, where we left it last time was that you gave some authority to the editing committee to make changes. And that process worked very well. There were a number of embellishments incorporated in the draft that's in your packet tonight. But the caveat to that was that if we came across an issue that was a substantive change that might necessitate approval of the full committee, we bring it back to you. So that's indeed what's happened, and that's why we called for the meeting tonight. Substantive change pertains to this issue of how the articles are amended in the future. And coincidentally, at our last meeting, sort of Herb raised that question, and we kind of left the conversation with trying to do something parallel to what Mill River had done, if you remember that. Subsequently, the very next day, we got some advice back from our school attorney this was an issue that Jackie had asked for some clarification on a while back. Coincidentally, he gave it to us the day after the meeting, which brought some greater clarity, I think, to the matter. And at any rate, you know our Articles of Agreement fairly well by now. We have in Article 10, we have the ballot language that actually goes before the voters to approve the merger. Okay?
Yeah.
So in terms of modifying the articles, what the law says is anything that the voters vote on, only the voters can change in the future. The law says any other article can be modified by a simple majority of the school board, the new school board. So that's in the law. So when we were at the meeting last time, we were kind of going back and forth, and I didn't really have a firm grasp of the concept. Herb was really interested in putting something in there parallel to Mill River. If you remember his argument, rightfully so, we need to have some means, some guidance on how to modify these things. Well, first thing is there is guidance. It's in the law. The law says that anything the voters don't vote on can be modified by a simple majority of the school board. Okay? So that was the first thing. Everyone with me so far on that?
Yes.
Okay. So then that provoked further conversation around the issue of school closure. Okay? So what you have in your packet, what I wrote up as sort of a summary for this, isn't quite, I think, what was intended from Herb's perspective, and I'll say from the edit committee's perspective as well. They wanted to introduce, firstly, this idea that it would be more than a simple majority. It would be a 75% supermajority, similar to parallel to language we used earlier that we talked about.
For the school closing.
For the school closure. So the intention is to, firstly, subject the school closure revision or amendment in the future to a 75% supermajority of the school
Yeah,
board.
the other number isn't working,
And that's
so
Article
you have to
18.
do your cell, okay?
No, it's
Kind of
Article
not,
14.
kind of not quite.
Hold
But
on.
so conceptually, what we're looking for tonight is for you guys to agree with this or not. So the language that's in your packet in the articles that's been drafted isn't quite where it needs to be. So we're looking for, hi Herb.
Hi, Herb.
Good evening.
I just started this is Dan Herb. I just started an introduction to this. So the articles that are in your packet will need to be revised further if you agree in concept to what we're proposing tonight, because I misunderstood what the edit committee was after, okay? So just to back up for a second. So the idea firstly is that we understand that the articles can be amended, those articles that are voted on by the voters can only be amended by the voters in the future. The law says anything else is amended by a simple majority of the school board. Okay? Previously, in Article 10, the articles that the voters vote on, we included school closure language. And the edit committee wants to remove it from there and suggests that that be subjected to a 75% supermajority vote of the school board.
Which is the same as the school
Yeah.
closing.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's really the concept we're looking for agreement from you tonight.
It's the amendment that would take us in. So
Right.
suppose somebody wants
Yeah.
to amend the.
Okay, Herb, go ahead, Herb.
I disagree with your formulation.
Okay,
We
sorry.
already agreed to the 75% supermajority of the school board. What we did not consider, as far as I know, was what to do about amending the other articles.
Yeah, I would disagree, Herb, because the first point I'm making is that we had embedded the school closure language in Article 10. So the idea here that previously, even though we might have talked about 75%, since it was embedded in Article 10, that meant that it would be a majority of the voters. So the first change that came from the edit committee was let's remove it from Article 10. But where I went astray is I thought the edit committee wanted to subject all articles to 75% other than being voted by the voters under Article 10. I believe the committee's intention is to just subject school closure to the 75%
Right.
and to leave the other articles not voted by voters to the simple majority provided by the law.
Right.
Is that right, Herb?
No, my point is that, and this has been the third time I've had to make this
Sorry.
with the edit committee, and I don't believe the committee as a whole ever decided how articles other than the one on school closure were going to be amended.
That's correct.
That's right.
That's right.
And before you got in the line, I just filled him in a little bit that we got an opinion or some advice from the attorney the day after saying the law provides the idea of a simple majority.
So we would be adding an article, Herb, that says that a simple majority of the board, right?
No.
No?
We would be, the concept is, does this committee, firstly, want to subject further approval of the school closure language to a 75% supermajority of the school board? That's concept
To
number one.
amend it.
In order to amend
I
it.
thought the committee already voted that that's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, but
But the
we put it into the
articles-
report in the articles where that wouldn't have been the case necessarily.
Okay, so I'll move.
Wait.
Yeah, let's just make sure everyone understands.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think that's the intention of the edit committee. First, the stuff I put in your packet subjected everything not voted on by the voters to 75%. And I believe that's not the intention of the committee. The
Right.
committee, in the issues around school closure, it kind of makes sense to me. You know, I could see both sides of it, but the idea was that 75% majority of the school board is a higher bar to cross than a simple majority of the voters. So the debate that took place after your meeting, the first part was to remove that from Article 10, school closure altogether. And that's indeed in the draft in your packet. It's no longer in Article 10. Okay?
That's correct.
So if it stands alone on its own as its own article, which it does now, we need to introduce some language, a new article, and you don't have it tonight because what's worded there is incorrect. But you need to introduce a new article that would subject school closure to 75% supermajority.
Yeah, subject the amendment.
Why
Yes.
not move exactly that issue, which is,
I just want to make sure, I
Yeah,
keep
let's see what Ed says.
misinterpreting, so I just want to make sure, I want to make sure Herb agrees or
Yeah.
can clarify it for you guys further, because he has it tighter than I do.
Yeah, because so what's happened is that the school closure has become its own Article 14.
Right.
We've made Article 18 is the one now that's under question, because we're
Yeah.
saying that all the articles.
Yeah, and that's
So
not what
Article
the-
18 could just be, these articles, except for Article 10, may only be amended, and we got two exceptions.
Article
to it.
18 is going to change.
So, but we don't need to add another article, it's just that the combination of school closure being 75% and everything else being a simple majority can probably all be looped into
Yeah, I
Article
will,
18.
the trick right now is just to get you to agree conceptually,
Okay.
that's what you want to do.
So-
Now, so the problem is for Sunderland, obviously, and for Danby Mount Tabor,
Right.
is now we've lost some of the possibility of protecting school closure.
Well, that's the debate you need to have as a
That
full
didn't
committee,
change-
because
That
I
doesn't
think,
change the concept that we had agreed
No,
upon, the school
in fact,
closure.
I think that was Ed's, Herb's concern.
Okay.
That was actually to give it a better chance that you'd have a voice.
So we think that the state might approve this, even though we've made it more difficult.
the state is going to defer this to you. It's really up to what you want to do as a committee. The question is it a higher, if your interest is in protecting small school closure,
Okay.
is it a higher standard to require, because currently you have language that says it takes 75% to close the school.
Right.
What we're talking about is changing that language. Okay, how does that language get changed in the future? Is it?
Dan, may I interject
Yeah, go
here?
ahead.
I thought that was the language we all agreed to, and the question is, how do you amend the other articles?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
That
so
would-
that we're saying that, I think I said that, but it's more than the 75%, it's the public hearing and
And all of that's still in
and
it.
all,
stands.
that's still in there, but.
But the question is, how would that language change? And Herb is saying.
So Article 14 is all those words, and therefore it would be 75% vote to change any of those words.
Right,
That's
yeah.
the, Herb, I think
Okay.
Herb is suggesting you've already agreed to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
Yes,
language
okay.
that language can only be changed through a 75% vote of the school board.
Okay,
Correct.
and all the rest of the articles is a.
Well, let's just hold
Okay,
there, because we've got
okay,
another
okay.
can of worms with that.
so we could put that concept as the first motion, which is to agree that we want a 75% supermajority of the board
Well, we
to
already have
approve
that.
a school
No, no,
closure
no.
as a
To
concept.
change the
amend
school
this.
closure language.
To amend Article 14.
To amend.
To amend Article 14, don't you think that is just rather than say
Yes.
school closure?
Well, if not, Herb's suggesting you've already approved this.
Yes.
If nothing else, we can at least get consensus that that's
Right,
what
so
you've
that we
agreed.
wanna
So
keep
once
that.
again, it's, You've already approved 75% supermajority as a mechanism to closing the school.
Right.
What we're talking about is how that language
Yes.
can be amended.
Then I
Right,
move
we've-
that the committee agrees.
This is Herb again.
Go ahead,
I'm
Herb.
sorry, but I can't raise my hand, so. I think that we've already approved both what you described and the idea that that article could be amended only by the same 75% supermajority. The question is, once again, not how you close a school or how you amend the article on school closure. It's how you amend any other article.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm suggesting my understanding is because we included in Article 10, I'm just telling you FYI wise, it's now out of Article 10.
Yes.
Okay?
Right.
And we did not have language previously in the articles to create a 75% majority to amend that. Okay?
Yes.
So
I
consider yourselves, if you're in
I-
consensus with that, then you don't need to take action. I've made that change now. So the question.
And so I think
Go
what
ahead.
you're saying, so we got the 75% as we'd spoken to close the school. And we want to approve the 75% to change that, to amend that article.
Okay.
And then after that, what Herb is speaking to is how to amend the other.
Right.
Okay.
But if it's in Article 10, then the voter population would vote on it. And if it's not on Article 10, then the law already states that it's a simple majority of the board to amend that article, correct?
That's correct.
Now,
So then we don't,
let's hold
so
on.
then we don't necessarily need to approve anything else as long as we don't put it into, if those articles are standalone.
Unless we
I
wanna
think we
change
got
it.
Unless we want to
confusion
change
about
the
Yeah,
simple
that's
majority.
one talk at a time.
One at a time.
Yeah, too many
The
people
thing is,
talking.
we don't want a simple majority to be able to say, all right, now we're changing Article 14.
Right.
Yes.
Say,
Right.
That's what.
Which
we're
is
going
what
with.
we'd want to approve the 75% to do that, but then if,
Right, so
what
they
I'm
can't
saying to
change
Herb is, because Herb is saying the other
The other
articles,
articles are right.
so long as they're not in Article 10, and we don't
Or Article
specifically
14.
refer to them as being 75% change, we don't need to identify a way to amendment, because the law already stands that it's a simple majority of the board.
Well, we're gonna talk more in detail on that, but Herb, what I'm seeing around the table is everyone's in agreement that school closure language should only be amended through a 75% vote of the school board, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so my fault last time of including that in Article 10, because that wouldn't, I don't think, been enacted that way, okay? So that's one substantive change. We can go in, let's go, if we're all set with that, I'd just like to go into the larger issue next of amending all of the articles, okay? So it's my understanding, anything in Article 10, meaning anything voted on by the voters, can only be amended by the voters themselves.
Right.
All the other articles, the default position under the law says that unless you say otherwise, the other articles are amended through a simple majority vote of the school board.
Right.
Which is the part we want to change to a majority for the Article 14.
We'll
right?
take care of this, yeah, we'll include some
Yeah,
school
okay.
closure language for sure.
But what I get Jay is saying is
The other
that you don't have to say
So
anything.
if we just specify Article 14 as being the same, we don't have to specify anything for the other articles if we want to leave it just a simple majority of the board. So, because I'm all, if we can
Okay.
leave as little
Right.
language as possible, and that's the way.
So here's,
So it's
if
default.
that makes sense to you, here's the kicker, sort of as an update where we're at. Herb raised a great point today. The way we have drafted the articles is we have parallel language. There's some things in Article 10 that are also mentioned in the articles. So for instance, the one we're chatting about this afternoon a bit is disposal of real
Of
estate.
property.
Okay, so there's an article that the voters vote on. But there's also an article as a result of a requirement from 706, what the article should say, we have it in both places. So then the question is, well,
I don't remember that.
how do we amend that? You know, and Herb's suggestion is to remove some articles that are outside of Article 10 or vice versa, you know, so they're only in one place, there's no confusion. So I've sent that out to Donna Russo at the AOE to comment on. She subsequently CC'd it to our school attorney. Turns out not many districts have decided to include ballot language as we have in Article 10. My impression is that our attorney recommended we do that as a result of his experience working with some other districts. So it's a point of confusion at the state right now as to how to approach this. And I expect to get some guidance tomorrow or Monday about how to proceed with it.
And which would
This
be,
is Herb again. I agree with everything Dan has said, but it seems to me that this committee can resolve the problem by simply deciding whether there are any articles other than Article 10 that it wants to have amended by a majority of the electorate, and those articles belong in Article 10. Otherwise, you take them out of Article 10 and you have them only in some other article, because if they are outside Article 10, then they're amended by a simple majority of the school board, unless, as with the school closure, you make a special rule.
Yeah, what Herb's saying to me.
So I don't see why the committee has to wait to hear from the AOE. The committee can decide which way it wants to amend that language and just move the language so it accomplishes the committee's purpose.
Yeah, my only concern is that, and Herb's logic makes sense to me, you know, and I think it is the primary lens at which now that I view the articles, you know, how they get amended. However, one of the points of logic that comes from the law also gives us certain things we have to address in the articles. So then, my only caveat or concern is that the AOE in the state board is going to be looking for certain things to be addressed in the articles, and we might be fine saying, well, they're addressed through the voter's ballot, you know, on Article 10. But I agree that we're probably heading towards what I would say a substantive change of putting them one place or the other, but not both.
So right now, during our Article 7 transfer of real property,
Right.
it is totally repeated on the ballot.
So what Herb would suggest is, what the committee would decide is, your point of logic is, who do you want to amend that in the future? Do you want the voters to amend it, or do you want the board to amend it? And you would put things in one location, but not both locations.
And is there a higher standard? Does one supersede the other?
Well, that's the point where we don't want to end up
Yeah.
in confusion or a fight over
Right.
how things get changed in the future.
Right.
So my only interest now, or my only hesitancy, is about what the AOE is going to need to sign off on your report. Now, we've had an initial reading, a formal reading of your articles. I got that back today from Donna Russo-Savage. She did not highlight this issue in her initial reading, but now it's on her radar. She is puzzled by it. So, but she did a very, very close reading and didn't find any real substantive issues. But I think, you know, for the purposes of this committee, you know, the idea was the edit committee was going to do some things that aren't really substantive, you know, make some embellishments. We've run into some things we increasingly felt uncomfortable not discussing with the whole committee. One being, you know, the school closure being subjected to 75%. Like I said, I had put that in Article 10 before, so just, you know, be clear, it's not there anymore. Secondly, this issue of amending the other articles, any of the other articles, the law provides the mechanism of a simple majority of the school board, where we're going to probably clean up the articles based on some guidance, if you're okay with it, is we're going to put articles in one place or the other, or the state's going to say we want them in both places because 706 requires it. But I think, you know, it makes a lot of sense, the logic that Herb's promoting, and I'm hopeful that will lead to a cleaner document.
Well, we can't control the latter until the state's commented, right?
No, you control the whole thing. I think Herb's right. I mean, it's ultimately up to you. It's a question of what's prudent to present to them. You know, we're trying to enter into an early conversation with them so that they're good in agreement with what we've provided, that it technically meets the requirements. I think that's a great way to proceed. You know, I wouldn't want to submit it to them cold. And I think this is a good issue. I mean, this is one of the more complex mergers, and you know, according to the AOE, not many have chosen to include ballot language. I think it's a good approach to include ballot language on some things. It makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm a little bit confused myself as to should show it in both places. But from the lens of how things get amended, it makes total sense to me they should be in one place or the other.
Do you want us to consider tonight the duplication?
No, I think it's due to what we're dealing with in terms of process. What I'd just like to do is report out to you that this is where we're at with it. I think first point would be, do you want to create some other process other than a simple majority provided in the law to amend the other articles or not? Because I didn't present that information clearly to you last time. I didn't really have a good concept. It came the day after the meetings. If you're okay with that, meaning that, you know, the other articles other than school closure would be subject to a simple majority, and I see heads nodding, then really all I need to tell you is a bit of an FYI, that we're going to clean up the articles on this issue of what goes where.
Okay.
And that should be happening in the next 48 hours.
So if we change Article 18 to apply only to school closures, then we're solved.
As long as you're okay with a simple majority issue for the other articles.
Right.
Okay, but still, it seems like there's a question on the transfer of real property, because are you saying that you will decide based on legal guidance whether it's going to stay in 10? I mean, my preference would be that the voters would have, to vote on something like that, because they've given over their school, so they ought to have a chance to get it back, as opposed, so that to the board, by a simple majority, being able to change that and do something, sell it and...
Yeah, it's a good point. I think two issues, for you to consider. One is, do you want some other standard other than a simple majority? And then secondly, are there things you think that are now subject to voter approval that you want to pull out? Or are there things that are currently subject to board revision that you think should be subject to voter revision? If you go through that list, are there some articles you want to promote one way or the other? The ones we pulled out
Yeah,
are the ones
that was probably my point.
Go ahead, Herb.
No, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah, so I think, the ones that are, if you look at the ones that are in Article 10 right now, they're the real estate ones, those transaction issues, because under school law, the voters have to approve transactions, real estate transactions. So by getting this authority now, we don't have to have a second vote of the electorate at some point to buy or sell a school. Well, the selectmen will have to do their thing, but the electorate of the school district doesn't need to vote. But are there things that aren't in Article 10 that you wish to include in Article 10 and only subject them to voter?
Okay, what's your name?
Well, reading Article 10, it looks like all it's about is forming the district. So what happens to Article 10 if everything passes and now we're a district? Does that, do you know what I mean? Because this is basically saying we're
There's also
voting to
transfer
merge.
funds.
There's a lot more in there.
You can keep going. I mean, it gives the terms.
There's a lot, it's all this.
So it's basically the real estate and the transfer, of assets.
And the merger piece,
Yeah.
all in one.
That is exactly. The voters are going to say, yes, we vote to merge based on these conditions.
Right.
The point is, none of those conditions can be modified unless the voters choose to do so at some future date.
Okay, so as how we proceed this evening, I think I've heard agreement that if we change Article 18 to at least apply only to school closure, what we have to consider now is, are there any other changes from Article 10 that we may want to
Pull out?
Or
put in?
So where are the overlaps? I guess those are the
The
ones.
real estate.
Real estate
property.
and assets are the two big.
7 and 8, I think.
And so if other merger committees choose not to put that on the ballot, that means it's not on the ballot. It means they don't later draft a
It
ballot.
means the school board can modify those things.
The only recommendation that I would have would be the Australian ballot. I would like to see that go to the electorate. To change away from the Australian ballot voting, says even school, Article 13, even school district voters shall vote on the budget and other public questions by Australian ballot with polling places provided in each member town. Ballots will be voted in the school.
That's,
So that's something that I would like the
That's-
electorate to be able to change,
Yeah,
not the
that's
school board.
It's a good point, actually. I'm going to take note on that, because under the law, only the voters can modify the voter methodology.
That's what I
anyway.
thought too, so,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
So let me, that's a good catch. Let me just get in there. So under the law, the voters are the only ones that can change the methodology.
So that has to be in 10 then.
Yeah.
It probably should be. It's good.
Well, we can't get board members
Well, I'm
forcing
the only
town
one.
meetings that people have to think.
I think ultimately, if they tried to do that, they'd be found to be appropriate. That's a good one.
Or possibly show up.
Of course, this is assuming someone's going to step into the ballot box and
Right.
read all of this.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a whole nother.
Are there any others that they're basically the big financial ones, and
I'm happy with everything else being something to worry about.
This is Herb. I may have missed this because I can't hear everything. But has there been any discussion about whether Article 8 should also be amended only by a 75% vote of the board as opposed to by the electorate?
Position of the school board.
there has been no discussion so far, Herb. Did you hear the Australian ballot conversation?
No.
So Jay had mentioned that the article pertaining to the voting methodology, which is Article 13, he's suggesting that should be in Article 10, because only the voters can modify the methodology anyway.
Of course, if only the voters can modify it, does it matter? I mean, by law.
Well, I mean, it should
Yeah.
be cleaner, though. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
the whole
right.
Yeah,
point
it
is to
should be
clean
out of
this
there
stuff up.
altogether or put it in
Yeah,
10.
right. Does that make sense to you, Herb?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the point. The point is that right now, Article 13, since it's not a ballot item, would be amendable by a simple majority of the new board, right?
Right.
And the question is, should that instead be a simple majority of the electorate?
Yeah, and I think the problem is that under the law, under the Australian ballot language, only the voters can modify their voting methodology. So I'm not sure.
Oh, I see the point, right.
Yeah.
Once you vote something by Australian ballot, you can only change it by Australian ballot.
Right. Yeah, or the voters themselves use their current methodology to modify their voting methodology.
Right.
So the school board can't change the methodology.
Okay.
Yeah. I do have one concern about Article 13, which I put an email to the edit committee, and I think to you, Dan. Might it not be better if we had some idea of which town voted how on, for example, a budget? Because if a budget is, let's say, narrowly defeated and people who want it to pass knew where the opposition was coming from, they might manage to direct their lobbying efforts a bit more, or the other way around. If it, I suppose, narrowly passed and the die-hard opponents wanted to know where to concentrate their fire, they could do it that way too.
Yeah, I don't think anything would preclude from keeping a tally that way, but I think from, we say co-mingle, that would be the overarching affirmative vote would be, it's kind of what we do now in UD 23. We know how Mount Tabor voted, we know how UD 23 voted, but the...
Well, as long as the co-mingle language isn't taken to mean that you can't have a tally by town.
Yeah, and we do that now with UD 47 as well, so I think that's doable.
Although in the red, when I was talking
You
about
throw them
town
all
clerk, the clerks count them and add them together, but nobody but the clerks know how many each town.
But you don't have
But
any
they do know
town school
that.
districts left either, though.
No,
Yeah.
no, so,
Well, that's what this will be, is no town.
yeah, this will be the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like the idea of being able to separate the town by town votes.
No, it is one district.
It's one district that just separates people.
Yeah, I think, that's the co-mingling language is really about coming up with a grand total.
Yeah.
The mechanics of doing that, I think, is within the discretion of the election officials in terms of how they manage that. But it's a good question. I don't know if we could do anything about that or not.
Yeah, I mean, should the word be totaled rather than commingled?
Yeah, I mean, I could check on that. I think my experience with the co-mingle, it's means something with the bringing the ballots together, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I mean,
what
I
the
feel like that's something
implications
we have to discuss anyway. I feel like I'd rather have it commingled than totaled if
are.
there's a
Yeah,
difference.
so there's a difference opinion on the committee as well, or about, but I'll check on it. Is there any strong opinion on that among the committee about what Herb's talking about? If there was a way to ensure that the separation of the ballots was,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that we should not separate out by town. That is just going to ruin the unity of the district. It's not about being able to focus your lobbying efforts. It's about the vote passing or not. We're not going to separate this one municipality into, well, Sunderland voted this way, and that's just going to create infighting. No, it's one district. Commingle them, don't know where their votes came from. This is what the one district voted as. Doesn't matter what town the votes came from. That's just going to cause politic fighting, in my opinion.
I totally agree with Jay.
That's worked pretty well in the red. We have no idea how they vote in the red.
all right, well, I'll look into it, but it sounds like her folks are in favor of keeping it sort of anonymous, if you will.
The clerk doesn't tell us.
Logistically, isn't it true that when you vote, you're going to have to vote in your town? Therefore, there is already, before the things have been commingled,
Yeah, there's some way.
a
to
mechanism
sure.
whereby you can find out how that town voted, much like a district.
Yeah.
You can find out what the vote was in a particular district
Yeah.
even though the totals vote
It's really,
is what
you know, it depends
matters.
on the election officials are supposed to bring the ballots to one place
Yes.
before they count them.
Right.
So they're not supposed to open the box or
No.
do that counting. They're supposed to bring it all in one place
Yeah.
under the supervision of the district
Still
clerk.
But to that point, I think you're right, though. I mean, if some private organization wanted to figure out where, I'm sure they could have resources to figure that out, even if it'd be like, people at the polling stations, I mean, there's ways to figure it out, but I don't think it should be in our language.
Because it feels like knowing after the vote isn't the issue, it's having a sense before, so we know if there are certain areas that need more clarification of a budget.
Well, I mean,
or-
just because they don't agree with it doesn't mean they need more clarification on it.
But wouldn't the representative from a town know that, on a board? Wouldn't you have a sense of how?
Yeah,
your
that's what I
neighbors-
mean, is I don't think
That's what a
knowing
representative
after the
government-
vote
yeah.
has I can't think of a positive that knowing after the vote how somebody voted would provide information that would be a
Well,
positive.
We've had experience
for
with
the
budgets being
district.
voted down, if you're going to do a revote, the second time around.
I see.
That's really where you're starting to try to
It would
understand,
be
well,
helpful.
why didn't people vote it down?
So as I understand what we're at now, we were discussing moving Article 13 into Article 10,
Right.
so everybody is in agreement on that? No?
Yes.
I mean, to not move it into.
To move it into
To move it
10,
into
because
10.
it's a,
That's fine.
It's a-
right.
Right.
Robert has it.
And the other question is, the wording that there may be some legal
Might
issues
be.
there. And we'll leave it up to you to
Yeah.
make.
I haven't heard a strong sense of the board, though, that they wanted some approach that would really make sure, some way to ensure through the article wording that it would keep the votes tallied separately. I'm hearing almost a consensus of the opposite.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think to
That's
form the
correct.
actual district, they have to be separate.
Yeah, that's a different animal.
So I think that's where I'm getting confused, because to me, Article 10 is about what's going to be on the ballot, all this stuff, about merging the district.
Right.
And then there's things after it's merged that kind of go away, and then you still need these other things to say, this is how it's done after the district is
Yeah,
merged.
that's this
Which
article
to
is like.
me,
the
Article
concept.
13 is saying, all right, after it's merged, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, and the voters
Whereas if you
can,
put it in Article 10, it's about
yeah,
merging.
but the voters can vote in the Article 10 about what the future is as well,
Oh,
so
okay.
that's the point. It's
Okay.
I think it is cleaner to put
So
it in Article
basically, we
10.
want to know what we need to add to Article 10 that we want them to vote on when we go.
Yes.
to
And
vote.
forever.
And in
forever.
terms of this amendment concept, what things do you want to make sure only they can amend?
Okay.
And I think the argument here is that Article 13 is really in the law, something only the voters can amend anyway.
Mhm.
So why not put it there, just to be cleaner?
So if it's in there, does that mean that's what they'll vote on every year?
That's what they'll vote on this time, this ballot.
If they want to
only.
amend it, then
Right.
they'll.
And if they want to modify it at a future date, the voters themselves have to approve a vote to modify their methodology.
Okay, so taking it out of these other areas is not going to,
Right, it's just,
Saying-
and actually in this case, I think it puts it probably where it should go,
Mhm.
which is clearly in the purview of the voters.
okay.
Are we ready for?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think Dan's point is, when you move it to Article 10, do you just use exactly the same language, or does it have to
Right.
be changed if you want to be able to see how each town voted?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't appear to be any interest on the part of the other committee members in that, but secondly, I'll do some research on the language, but I'm unfamiliar with anything right now on how I would do that.
Good way to proceed?
I agree.
Okay, so we're ready for
Okay.
language on,
Article 8, I think was the other,
Article
or another
8.
one.
Well, should we make a motion to approve the whole?
Why don't we just put it all together
Okay,
at once?
okay,
We'll see if there's any other interest.
Sounds good.
Herb had brought up Article 8,
Right.
which is
Composition of the school
Yeah.
board.
board
That's
composition.
at-large voting, so.
Because that's going to be in Article 10, or.
So we're
that's-
saying we should move this into Article 10 as
It
well?
is.
Is that-
It is.
It is in Article 10. It's duplicated in
So
Article.
this would be one of the duplicates. So as a committee, when we get to these duplicate issues, would you rather see it one place or the other? If that's where we're going to end up going. If it's allowed, would you rather have the board be able to modify the composition of the board, or would you rather have the voters modify the composition of the board?
I'd like the voters to
Voters,
modify
yeah.
the composition of the board.
We-
Since
board
we
member-
have proposed language that nominates people at the at-large seat from 4 different towns, but everybody in every town votes. If that proves to be unfair or unworkable, I'd like the voters to weigh in with the recognition that that previously thought-out fair process is no longer fair and it needs to be revised.
Does that make sense, everyone?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Herb, everyone's in agreement, I think, that 8 should be moved to Article 10. Do you have an opinion on that?
I think it ought to be taken out of Article 10 because as a representative from Mount Tabor, I can easily foresee a time when a majority of the whole electorate says, let's not give Mount Tabor or Sunderland, for that matter, any votes at all.
Oh, well, that's not legal.
No, so I have a, can I ask
You
the,
have to have at least one representative
Yeah.
from each community.
can I ask a question to the one I wrote this
Oh,
afternoon?
yeah, I see. You're relying on right, the statute.
The
Yeah.
statute requires at least
Each one has to
one.
have one.
Yeah.
Right, so if we,
Yeah.
if we comply with the Act 46 rule about one, at least
That's
one.
not Act 46,
Um,
that's 706.
706 rule that we have at least one representative from each town and that the maximum number of seats is 18,
Something like, yeah.
and that we couldn't
Yeah,
find.
I'd forgotten about that. And
Right.
now that you've reminded me, I don't feel strongly about whether it should be a separate article or whether it just moves into Article 10.
You guys feel that the voters should amend that strong? I mean, it seemed to be consensus on this
Yeah,
idea.
Yeah.
that's a thing the voters need to make.
Right,
So is that consensus on that?
yes.
Yes.
So I'm seeing heads heard that say that should stay under our 10, you know, or meaning the
Yeah.
voters should only be able to amend the structure of the district
Right,
Which would mean that we'd eliminate Article 8.
if we're allowed to, yeah.
Yeah, so I was
Oh.
wondering, can we just take out that?
can you
article?
refer, and when you say Article 8,
I'll get
please
some
see.
clarity clarity on that whole
Yeah.
thing, but it's really, I think the primary thing is to understand what your intention
Right, right,
is on how you want to approach that.
right.
Okay, so we've got consensus on that.
Article 7,
Property,
the property issue, I assume you want to leave with the voters,
yes.
the financial stuff with the voters, you know, because that was the whole intention of Article 10 anyway.
Yep.
So that stuff should stay
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Herb, you agree with that?
So then do you get rid of Article 7?
Yeah, I mean, if I can get clearance from the state on the structure of the articles, that would be the intention, would be to eliminate the duplication and only put the things in the category where you want as a committee it to go.
Right,
Yeah.
So 7, Herb, would be only Article 10 essentially.
Right.
Okay?
right.
So we have 7, 8, 13. Are there any other articles that you suggest go one way or the other? This is substantive work. It is, it's good stuff.
I don't think so. I think we're good with that. I mean, everything else is gonna be pretty much done.
Right, right.
Before there's a chance to change it anyway.
Well, if
Right.
there are no others,
There being no others, I will make a motion.
Make a motion.
Make a
to accept
motion
the
to
amend
changes as
Article 18.
proposed.
Well, I think I'd like to be, let's be more specific in that reviewing and finding duplication. I make a motion that we delete Article 7, Article 8, and Article 13 and include them in full in Article 10,
If we're allowed to.
if we're allowed
We're
to.
allowed to. That's,
Can't you cross-reference one to
Second.
the other?
I'd second this.
I'd rather have it clean.
Yeah,
like Herb
but I
said.
mean, if we have to put something in that, a line, something in
Yeah,
there.
that's where we'll get some advice if it's
Right.
required, but hopefully we can just.
Unless it's required by.
Yeah.
the
any
state.
more discussion on the motion?
I second it.
I thought you made it.
I did.
Change.
so I get a little bit,
I
of
tried.
just, so if we can't, I mean, because getting back to this whole, like, if we have to duplicate them, if the state requires them to be in 2 separate spots, can't we put it in like, so like Article 7, we can place, like, to amend this article must be voted on by the electorate. And then that would make it clear in Article 7 that that's our choice, and it's in Article 10, which means it has to be, so that would like clear up any sort of
I'm
gray.
hoping it wouldn't even be that, it would be something like articles pertaining to these items as specified in 706 can be found under Article 10.
Which would lead
Ah.
them
Yeah,
to being
yeah,
voted on by
yeah.
the
So there's a
electorate.
hook and a connection
Okay,
that
okay,
way,
Right.
okay, yeah, all right.
as opposed to restating anything
Right.
at all.
Okay.
I just want to
Yeah.
put it.
That's good.
And that doesn't change the motion at all, so.
No.
Yeah, so we need some flexibility to get
Yeah.
that piece of feedback. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's just a little bookkeeping or
I get it, yeah.
Are we ready to vote?
I want to ask a question,
Yeah.
pertinent to, but not affecting. So maybe you guys discussed this earlier in another meeting, but how do, in the future, if this all goes forward, then how do the voters get something on a ballot to then vote on? What do you mean?
Like if they wanted to make a referendum on the ballot,
Other than electing, people.
Oh, how do they get,
Or how
Or
they
could
say,
the voters
hey,
say-
I want to change the makeup of the board.
Yeah.
To make it to 18 or something like that. How does that function?
yeah, so just like you have now, I mean, you're talking about the construct of the warning itself. The school board has the ability to put stuff on the warning, and then if they didn't want to do it, they could be forced to do so by a petition.
So
It would be a petition in that case of the entire district, whatever percent of the entire district voters, right? So they could be,
Right, that's already set by statute.
yeah, so just think about your regular process you have now, but the school board would have the authority to put it on under their own action, or they could be compelled to do so under a petition.
Okay.
And what will be our process in 48 hours do we?
Well, that's sort of next on our agenda.
Right.
We'll talk
let's vote on
about
this
where we're
motion,
at.
yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready for vote on this then. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? It's unanimous then, it passes.
Okay. So that is pretty much the largest substantive issue. I mean, that's one issue. I mean, so it's very complex. And I think it was really, really good reading on your part as a committee to pull that together. Want to talk a little bit about where we are with the rest of it. It's still, and for my own role as sort of the editor of this, I think what you've done as a committee is you've empowered the chair and the vice chair to do a final approval on this. Is that still your wish?
Yes.
Let me give you a sense of some of the other issues, and before you all nod your heads. What we've done is shared a draft. The initial tweaks at the edit committee, that's essentially the draft that's in your packet tonight, went to Donna Russo-Savage, the attorney for the AOE that's in charge of Act 46 essentially for the state board. She's the front end of the process. That went to her on Thursday or Friday. Over the weekend, she provided some feedback on that, and I received that today. And her comments are, she's very positive about the report. Didn't have any major substantive or technical or legal issues, other than the one we brought to the surface tonight or this afternoon about the separation of these articles. The other, Brad James, however, who's one of the chief financial guys of the state, also provides comments on every merger proposal, and we haven't received his comments yet. So I imagine those will be most of the financial, the transactional stuff. So we'll wait to hear from that. And we've got a couple, I think, legal things out there we're waiting for our attorney to weigh in on. One is this issue of the division, and the second one is still the issue of the representation, one man versus one vote kind of thing, at-large voting versus proportional representation. So initially last week, after you guys met, I started to I reached out to Jackie and I said, here's a couple of things, documents that would be really good to include with the report. One is a letter of transmittal from the chair, John, just saying, Secretary Holcomb, here's our report. So he's working on that. And another one is to Jim Salzgiver, our chair of the BRSU board, to include a statement about the resolution that the SU board adopted about reconfiguring the SU board if the new district is placed inside SU. So we want to include that as an appendix in the report as well. And the third item was an opinion letter from our attorney on this issue of at-large voting or not. Because I had seen those in most of the other merger documents. That immediately came back, I won't say immediately, but shortly thereafter, we got an email both from Donna and Steve Stitzel, our attorney, saying, really it's unnecessary because you're doing at-large voting. There's no need for an legal opinion in justifying proportionality since you don't have to file proportionality with at-large voting. So there's no formal requirement from the AOE to include a legal opinion, but we're still seeking some legal guidance for our own edification. But the AOE does not require a legal opinion on when at-large voting is being employed. So to me, I'm in a position now of just waiting to hear back. We're still waiting to get some clarity on that. I think Herb and I think Steve has offered to talk directly with Herb anyway.
I don't know if they have yet.
Okay.
But
Have you talked with him yet, Herb?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
So it's great to have a lawyer on a committee, so maybe her can, if that happens, but we're still going to get something from Stephen anyway. But the way I understand it is that if you employ at-large voting, then you're not restricted to satisfying any kind of proportionality issue. So it's
yeah, and to put my concern in a very small nutshell, the trouble I think we could get into is if we publicly publicize the 75% vote required to close a school, and tie it to the idea that if Danby and Mount Tabor plus and Sunderland plus one of the four at-large representatives were to oppose it, then it couldn't happen. Then it begins to sound like the representatives from Danby and Mount Tabor and Sunderland really are just representatives from there. They might not actually be reflecting what they think is the good of the whole district. And the whole rationale of the various U.S. Supreme Court decisions on that are the idea, I think it's a bit of a fiction, but it's the idea that once you have at-large voting, it's okay to require a nominee from a certain district, because if that person is elected, that person doesn't any longer really represent the district. That person represents everybody in the whole new organization.
Right.
As long as we behave as if that fiction is really truth, I think we're fine. But if we take a public stand pointing out how the smaller towns could prevent a school closure, then it begins to look like we're thinking the representatives from those towns really aren't representing the whole new RED.
Yeah. So in terms of, that's an outstanding issue, and we'll get some guidance on it. In terms of process, I think, John as chair, his initial interest is getting this before the state board on the 20th of December.
Yeah.
So that's still a possibility. I doubt we'll see any substantive. We've had a few of you submit other edits. That's great. What I'm doing from the editor role is shifting them through John and Richard. So they'll be sort of the traffic cop. So if you see anything else, by all means, forward it along. Tomorrow, I'm going to take a whack at Donna Russo-Savage's comments and put those. None of them are really substantive. They're more from a legal perspective, clarity on certain phrasing. For instance, she would say use supervisory district and say instead of conventional merger. Just to be clear, because we would prefer you say that one thing or the other. So I think all that being said, assuming we get some legal feedback on, if we did get something, now Stephen and Donna have all signed off on the at-large voting approach. If we were to get something that said that's a no-go, the way you've set it up, that would be a substantive red flag, and we'd have to convene again to go forward. Assuming that's okay, then it will go forward, I suppose. Okay? And there is one point, reviewing Donna's comments, I just wanted to check in with you a little bit, because one of the things I knew, it was by design, to provoke a conversation around the SD versus SU issue, okay? So that dialogue has sort of started with Donna and the AOE about what to do with this merger. She kind of kicked it back in her email to say, well, what do you guys really want to do, So the phrasing in the report is it identifies pros and cons, and you've read that, and it says, if it were to be an SU, we want to have assurance, that the state board would entertain a waiver of the configuration. So I think she's inviting us to perhaps be more forceful in that language to suggest that if you do have a preference, and then secondly, are you looking for a preliminary ruling from the state board on a waiver if they choose to go with the SU? Meaning that we have some assurance to the voters, because that's kind of, we put that in there, that the voters are unlikely to approve the merger unless they understood the context in which the district can be placed. So
our discussion,
yeah, go ahead.
As I recall it, initially focused on an SD,
right?
Because we wanted to avoid the problem of a lack of control by the merged schools about what happens. But based on what you said, and also based on the substantial decrease in overall costs to each town. The sentiment in the room, if I can judge that, switched dramatically as long as there was fair representation in an SU. So the overwhelming consensus by body language was for an SU with a waiver.
Yeah.
And if we weren't going to get the waiver, then we had to go back and revisit that. And so SU with a waiver, we were all good. If we don't get the waiver, then we
Yeah.
lose our control.
That's a
And
non-starter.
an SD becomes the preferred methodology, despite its financial repercussions.
Yeah, so it's more costly.
Much more.
Is that sort of the direction you want to pursue this?
I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Herb, do you have a sense of that, Herb?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, that's helpful to me. I mean, it's going to be sort of a nuanced thing, how we put the emphasis on this, but I think definitely, I'm going to respond back, we're looking for a waiver, as part of this. So we'd be requesting a preliminary ruling from the state board at the same time they're voting on the merger.
It also addresses, an SU happens to address the problem of geographic isolation.
Which would be the-
which is a
yeah.
major impediment to the SD.
Yeah, which would be the likely criteria by which they would reject your report as an SD, or they would say, we don't agree with you, we'll approve your merger, but we're gonna do, the other. Okay, that's great. So I'll work on that as well. But I think, we're on track right now, for early next week, assuming we don't find any other thing, probably by Wednesday, I would say, to shift this out.
Well, I want to make sure that
Yeah.
we've covered the amendment, as I heard it, shifts certain things into Article 10. Have we handled the issue of what takes a vote, affirmative vote by 75% of the school district for school closure? That's already in there. So we are in effect eliminating Article 18.
No, I think
it'll
there will
say
be new
just
language in
closure.
Article 18, or Article 18 will be revised to include saying, school closure is not subject to a simple majority, it's subject to this 75% supermajority of the school board. It's going to be a higher standard than the other articles not in Article 10.
Okay.
But the way I wrote it there, I thought the intention was to apply it to all articles other than Article 10. And the head of committee's intention was only to apply it to school closure. So that, what you have
So
now
that's-
as Article 18 is not correct, so that will be
Right,
revised
okay.
to focus in on school.
Because the
Everybody's clear on
default
that.
is simple majority
Right.
anyway.
Yes.
Any other business?
Well, once we get this final copy, once you have something mail out to the state, you can email the final draft.
Absolutely, yeah. But if you have any other edits, just you can send them to whoever. I'm going to send everything through Richard and John at this point, so they sign off on it. Okay.
Just another item of business for the next meeting, I talked to, I happened to see two of our town clerks, and they would like, did we say that we would convene them all at some point, the town
Yeah.
clerk? They'd like to
I've
do
had that communication with them.
Yeah, the sooner the better is what they said.
I know, I just don't have time right now.
Yeah, right, but
I
I'm
have to
just
get through
conveying their
budgets.
message
Yeah,
to us.
I get it, and I'll do it as soon
Yeah.
as I can, but,
they
Yeah,
definitely have to be brought into the process.
yeah,
Right.
and we will do that, yeah.
There are going to be six other merger votes on the 20th, so it's a full
6
agenda that
other.
day. Yeah, so it's a full agenda that day.
Wow. Just a question about the next date, because the minutes at the last meeting, we decided January 5th,
Right.
but now it says January 4th.
I'm asking, yes, we want to know if January 4th can work, because January 5th had already had a scheduled, my mistake, already had a scheduled negotiations with teachers, and that's something we can't move. And we have a number of our members are involved in that work. So I'm asking if you can do the 4th, and we'd have that at the Dorset School, because I believe on that date, there's a 6 PM Dorset meeting. So there are a lot of budget meetings the first 2 weeks in January, so we're trying to find a time where it doesn't present a conflict for members of this committee. So we would do a 7 o'clock and try to get the Dorset board meeting wrapped up by 7.
The 4th works for me.
Yeah, me
Me
too,
too.
better
For me.
than the 5th.
Okay,
It's fine.
all right, so we'll put that on that.
So we would tentatively say that the new date is January 4th,
At
7 PM at Dorset
Dorset.
School.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you're hoping anyway, right?
Okay,
I move for adjournment,
I second that motion.
okay.
given the fact that there's no public.
Very good.
Good work. Thanks for all of you for
Thank you very much.
rallying to come up
We'll
with.
assume that that's a unanimous vote.